I'm so excited to be here. We've spent the last couple of days talking about health and from a variety of angles, which has been really exciting. Not just barriers to access to care, but some of the structural and cultural conditions that stop us from being fully whole and fully well in our lives. One of the through lines throughout the festival, for me, throughout all the talks, has been what are some of the systemic barriers and some of the mindsets that we really need to overcome to make sure that the communities we care about get the care that they need. This could include racism and how that impacts your mind, your body, or your spirit. It's sexism and how that could impact how you're treated in the medical system, or your sexuality or your gender presentation, and how that may not be identified by the medical system. But how are these ideas connected? And one through line that's been at the tip of my tongue for all of the sessions has been this concept of intersectionality, or the idea that we have competing identities or different identities that put us in different positions and make us have different experiences based on that. As thinkers, it's been a groundbreaking framework coined by the feminist theorist Kimberly Crenshaw in helping us specifically identify the experiences that women of color have within the medical system, for her within the legal system. So today we're going to talk about something that has been touched on in a lot of the panels, and it's specifically this moment that we're having, a reckoning around sexual abuse and sexual trauma, the normalcy with which it's impacted our communities, and ultimately how it's impacted women's health. So without further ado, it is an honor to have this specific panel of women today to talk about not just this, but some of the structural issues that women face and disenfranchised communities face when trying to heal from and deal with trauma in our communities. So, to my left, Ava DuVernay. Ava is an Emmy-nominated writer, director, filmmaker, and if you came to her simply illuminating talk yesterday, you would know that she's not just a filmmaker, she makes documentaries, she makes movies, she makes feature films, she makes museum films and music videos, and pretty much anything that she can get her hands on, and we're all better off for it. Welcome, Ava. Jen, to my left, is the executive director of the National Domestic Workers Alliance and the co-director of Caring Across Generations. Jen is someone I've also known for a long time. We were scholars here together 5 years ago. And Jen has truly worked on the front lines of redefining what labor organizing looks like, what intersectionality looks like, and her groundbreaking work with We Belong Together has been working on the issue of family separation for a long time. So welcome, Jen. So Ava, let me start with you. Before we talk about Me Too, I think so much of your work, with 13th and with Queen Sugar, and also many of the points you were talking to yesterday about creating community, have to do with how systemic racism and systemic experiences impact our wellness. Can you talk about that a little bit?
Tell me, say it. I thought you were gonna. I'm sorry. Yeah. Say it one more time.
Yeah.
I thought it was. one more, yeah.
So basically, the role that systemic racism plays in someone's ability to be well, that has been a focus of a lot of your work. What motivates that?
Good morning. Good morning, everyone. Usually on film sets, we're not asked to be this articulate and smart this early in the morning. It's like, bring me coffee, action. But no, I think, I can just speak about my own work and the fact that, when I have the opportunity to narrate my experience or am given the opportunity to narrate the experiences of others, that my choice is to make sure that that is as full-bodied, as human and humane, two different things, as close to an actual experience as I can get. And it sounds like a given, but it's not. So often in my industry, folks, writers sit down with a pen and paper and they project whatever they personally think it should be, as opposed to trying to get as close to what it is. And so I think I talk about it a lot in 13th, the idea that the imagery that we're consuming is just what a lot of people think, as opposed to what it really is. And that's really dangerous and unhealthy when you are dealing with images of people who are underrepresented, because those images become what it is, the norm. And there was just new information out, and I hope you'll talk a little bit about, you will, about what's going on at the border and your work there. But there was just some statistics that came out. They were presented by Define American, an immigrant media resource guide for writers and directors, just saying, hey, we don't say alien anymore, we say undocumented. You'd be surprised at how much folks out in Hollywood are using the wrong language, and that language is broadcast all over the world. 190 countries, Netflix. If as a writer and director we get it wrong, then someone watches that and consumes it as truth often. So it's really important to try to bridge that gap between what people think and what it really is, and that's a lot of the building blocks that we work with, that I'm specifically very serious and emotional about. And not just in my own work, but trying to get other people who do what I do to see it's not enough just to have read that one book or watched that one documentary, and then you go write the series about the people, but you never met the people, and you don't really know what it is. We find that happening far too often. So that's how I think imagery can really damage us, but also how it can save us if we get it right.
Yeah, thank you. And to that point, for me, when I have seen so much of your work, it feels healing for me, right? And whether that's just seeing images and stories that have historically been denied, and I know, even in hearing how people have been talking about your work, that is a shared experience, and I think that to me does show the importance that representation plays in your actual wellness, not just what opportunities are possible. So Ijen, you have done all this work with family separations. You were just at the border. Can you tell us, this is very much top of mind, I think, for many people here, how can it not be? And then to consistently see the administration essentially gaslight us and make us question our own sanity by trying to normalize something that is absolutely atrocious. Talk a little bit about what you've seen at the border and what's happening there.
Good morning. First of all, this right here, #LifeGoals. And I want to actually personally say thank you to Ava for democratizing the story of who we are as a country and who we're becoming, and to Samhita for the wokest channel ever for young people. It's so important, and so important, both of you. So I did just come from the border, and I will say that the images that you're seeing here and there don't begin to capture the horror of what's happening. It is absolutely a moral atrocity. There were about a few hundred of us gathered on Father's Day for a vigil in front of the Ursula Border Patrol Processing Center, where there are about 1,000 children being held at any given moment. And even as we were standing there for about 3 hours, buses, unmarked buses filled with children passed us by several times. Children being carted around the region like prisoners in unmarked buses, and one bus full happened during the vigil, and we were able to chant and say, "You are not alone, and we are here," in Spanish and in English, and they reached for us, and it was the single most, I'm gonna cry, the single most heartbreaking experience of my life. And those separations have not ended. There are more than 3,000 children who've already been separated, who've been dispersed around the country with no plan for reunification. And now the plan is to expand family jails up to about 20,000 beds on military bases So we still have baby cages and we still have family camps. That is what's in the works. And at the beginning of it, 2 months ago, was a policy that was about prosecuting parents for doing what every parent does, which is do everything in their power to keep their children safe. That is what parents do. And they're being prosecuted for it, and their children, some as young as 8 months old, taken from them. I feel like this is one of these moments where, we're going to read, our kids and our grandkids are going to read about it in the history books, and they're going to ask us, what did we do to make it stop? And we better have a good answer. That is all. That is my main message. And we can, and actually the outrage and the outpouring and the actions are actually having an impact, right? They forced a response this week, but make no mistake, the atrocity continues and it evolves, and we have to continue speaking out and speaking up and taking action, because this is our country and we have the power to make it stop. Just one quick note is June 30th, there will be a major protest in Washington, D.C. at the White House, and protests in every state in the country, all 50 states. 450 different events already planned in less than a week's time. I really hope you'll join and find as many ways as possible. You can learn more on the website Families Belong Together. And I'll just say, just on the point about intersectionality and health and all these systems, I think at the root of all of the inequities that we've been talking about over the last few days is a hierarchy of human value that defines our economy, our culture, and then we have to create a story, a narrative that explains or legitimizes why some people and their contributions are valued, some lives and some people's health are valued less than others. And that is what we have to disrupt, because where that takes you is a place where children are less than human. Where that takes you is where we are now with this atrocity. And so that is, I think, at the heart of intersectionality, why we have to continue to humanize and resist the dehumanization of any person, any human being, and affirm the full and entire humanity of every single person.
So thank you for that and for your decades-long work on this particular issue. You once invited me to the border, and I did get to take a trip to Tijuana and meet with mothers who had just been deported and separated from their families. And I remember somebody who was working at the center with the women said, these women, we can tell them to not try to cross the border, but their children are on the other side, and there is no law, and there is nothing, no gun, no wall that we can do to stop them. They will keep trying. And that has stuck with me. Can you talk a little bit about the spiritual and traumatic damage that it does to a family to be separated in this way?
It's very hard to describe. I mean, some of you have heard the audio tapes and some of the interviews, and I really encourage everybody to listen, because I think we actually do really need to face the reality, the human experience of this crisis in a different way in order to move through and beyond it. But the stories of mothers who have not slept since they've been separated from their children, who cry and cry and cry, and the children who I mean, many of you are physicians and medical professionals. You understand the trauma and the way in which the trauma gets embedded in the life experience and the DNA of these people. And it's a generational kind of trauma that we're talking about here, right? And so it's hard for me to capture in one particular story, but I'll just say, so there was a young girl who came with us to the Father's Day Vigil all the way from Florida, a girl named Leah. She's 12, and she brought stuffed animals and cards and letters from children in her community to deliver to the children who were in the detention facility. And she was escorted by Secretary Castro to the door, and they begged to be able to deliver something comforting, stuffed animal, something, a blanket, something to the children. And they were refused unequivocally. And the lawyers have been saying to us that the Border Patrol will not allow for any stuffed animals, any items that provide any level of comfort for these children. I mean, that is torture for a child, right? So that's
Thank you. So kind of thinking about this broader topic of wellness, and I do see very much the border as very much a women's issue also, and expanding on how we think about feminist activism and women's activism, how that's just very top of mind for me as a feminist, and I think for many of us. But I do want to talk about what's happening in Hollywood right now, and I think across the culture in terms of women coming forward with stories of abuse and trauma. Ava, I'll start with you. Do you think that storytelling has caught up to this moment of Me Too? Are we going to start seeing, or actually, you know what I actually want to know from you? Do you think we're actually having a reckoning right now? Because everyone's like, oh, the big moment, everything's going to change from here on out. But, as Ijen's talking about the border, we know these stories. These stories are in front of us, and we're not seeing, the change feels very far. It feels like it's far away. So do you think that we are actually having a reckoning in Hollywood around sexual abuse?
Gosh, I'm still at the border in my head, so it's hard to take this right turn. Yeah, things are changing. It's small. It's a lot of conversation. The actual systemic change within the industry is far off. There is not actually change on the ground in terms of the way that we work there. That hasn't changed, other than well-meaning people asking, "What do we do?" and trying to say the right thing and use the right vocabulary. But in terms of there actually being an empowerment of image and a muscularity to the images that we're making, and that they really address the current moment, not yet. It's pretty new. I hope that will come. When I hear you speak about what you've just shared, and when I think about the Me Too movement or whatever it is, it just really solidifies for me the power of image. And I was speaking, I don't know, maybe about 6 months ago with someone who was an activist around HIV/AIDS crisis, and said that for a couple years, there was a real concentrated effort to try to share with people, the American people in particular, what the realities of being around someone with HIV/AIDS was. That we were still draining pools, that folks wouldn't let their kids sit next to another child with HIV, that there was and many of you are in the healthcare profession, there was a visceral fear of even proximity. And that there were reports, and there were news articles, and there were activists trying to speak about what the reality was, that there was nothing to fear, but that would really change the public consciousness in a mass way was when image makers listened to activists and healthcare workers on the ground and created mass works. Angels in America, Philadelphia, Pedro Zamora on Real World on MTV. These were the things that you could see the story, you could see the person. And that is how it all changed. So it's going to take time and hopefully we can collapse that amount of time, for the folks like me who have tools to speak to the world, to be able to connect directly, not what we think it is, but get close to what it is and start to translate that into narratives that are deeply meaningful to people wherever they are. It's happened. We know it's happened. We look at work around the trans community. In a matter of just 5 years, less than that, people being able to even understand my mom, who just didn't know, are they cross-dressing? Are they gay but want to be don't know. Just because, how would she know, right? But then she watches Orange is the New Black. She's like, that's a lady. And I was like, yeah, that's a woman.
A very beautiful
That
woman.
is a woman. She's like, that is a woman. I said, that is a woman. She's a trans woman. Trans woman. Okay, tell me about that. Wants to know more. And then starts watching it, one of her favorite characters. And then now she's got it. She just needed to know, right? And know in a way that allowed her to come in through an emotional lens as opposed to a place of fear or ignorance. And so I think those are the ways, whether it's Me Too, whether it's what we're experiencing with immigration, it's what I'm really interested in is trying to have people holding hands around these things. Because I don't know unless Ijin tells me, and then Ijin tells me, and then I take what I know with that, and then I create something that, so we can all know. I think that's the space that we're in, and so for Me Too, it's a ways off. And I think, around, issues of separation, family separation and immigration, it's going to be a ways off. I mean, I'm thinking about it today, and I'm thinking, why are they coming? And what are they coming from? And are we going to look at that? The U.S. and America's involvement and the reasons why people are fleeing Mexico, Honduras, Guatemala. We don't want to talk about that. We go too deep into why this is happening. And so those are the kinds of things we hope creatives will start to think about and hold hands on.
And I think one of the things I'm really proud of in this moment, speaking of Me Too, is just how women are showing up. I really do feel like, I don't think anyone would deny that women are the most powerful force for change in the country right now. I don't think there's any argument. And the way women are organizing right now is across race, across industry, across experience, and really reaching for understanding, right? Really reaching for a depth of understanding. The way that the Time's Up Legal Defense Fund was organized to be able to support women in low-wage sectors to actually get access to legal services, and the way that women in the entertainment industry, like Ava, are in constant conversation with social movements and organizers, really trying to understand the nuances of where the levers for change are, whether it's in the story or in the policy. Like, we're actually really working across industries and race in a way that I think models what we need to be doing as a country in order to have a healthy, multiracial future. Right? I think we're really onto something here. It's not just that dismantling disparities and injustice is, the right thing to do. It's actually the thing that unlocks the future that we want in this country. My friend Franklin Leonard talks about the genius of the film Hidden Figures is that nobody walks out of that movie thinking anything except for wondering, wow, these women did that. Despite structural racism, despite structural sexism, if those systems did not define our lives, imagine what would be possible. We would all be flying around in space packs. The human potential we leave on the table because of injustice and sexual harassment and anti-immigrant policies, there is a future that is full of love and life in this country and health that we can achieve if we unlock some of this stuff.
We're actually at time. I feel like we just skimmed the surface. But please, if you take anything from this, and there were so many amazing points, the power of story and the stories that we're putting out there and the impact that has on the actual communities that we're grappling with. And I just want to make one comment about what you talked about last night, if you could speak to it, just Governor Mike Huckabee's tweet with that image of, what was, he tweeted something like, this, it was like,
He tweeted an image of 3 Mexican men who were adorned with body art tattoos, an image that most Americans would look at and think, criminal? I thought they were beautiful, but I know what he was trying to do. And he tweeted it out and said something disparaging about Nancy Pelosi, like this was her new committee for something.
That's right,
I don't know. But it's just the idea of image as weapon, image as weapon against us, and what we have to do is use the images, for me, use the images as weapon for us. And so just watching what we're consuming, where it's coming from, how it's coming from, who it's coming from, is something that the audience dictates. The audience, you vote when you watch, you vote when you go to that film, you vote when you turn off the TV, you vote when, you don't watch Roseanne, you don't watch it. You don't watch the things that don't speak to you, or you do watch Roseanne if it speaks to you. But our industry is so much about audience, and the audience doesn't even know its power. Yeah. And so you are audience, and I just want to say before we go, this time, I could cry on this time. I really needed these couple days here. I'm going in to make a new piece about a great injustice that happened, and was feeling a little untethered, and just being here in this beautiful space with so many beautiful people, everyone that I've passed. Last night in the room with the conversation, the warmth was so nourishing. It's like fuel, it's like food for me. And I hope that you all, as this session closes, take something beautiful back with you wherever you are, because we're seeds, and we can plant them. And I really believe it's going to be a one-to-one battle. Yes, we talk a lot about systems and technology, but in the end, it's right here, and everyone can do that. So thank you for having me so much.
Thank you.